It's the day before the draft, and I mean, there's a little bit of a Dan's pretending he cares thing going on here. I'm not going to shy away from that. But at the same time, I do think it's important that we have at least a cursory understanding of the folks that are on their way in to the NBA. Happy Tuesday to you all. I am Dan Vespers. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. At Dan Vespers on Twitter, at Old Man Squad on Twitter. And today, I'll be joined by my good friend, David Williams, a partner in crime for me for a very long time. David and I worked super close over at Sports Ethos for about 2 to 3 years. We worked like medium close for another year or two beyond that. So, first of all, really excited to get him back on this show now, but also the fact that he's now officially a part of the Old Man Squad network. And he'll tell you about his show when we chat here in just a minute or two. Draft, of course, is 2 days this year. And I can tell you definitively that I will be watching probably the first 2 to 3 picks. And I will check in on the Lakers picks. And then I will come back to smart people, have them on the podcast, and they can tell us what it all means, man. There was no additional news across the NBA over the last 24 hours or so. Things have mellowed a tad here, I think, likely in preparation for the draft. Although, who knows, maybe we'll get a trade going down at some point today. And if we do, maybe I can sneak out a emergency show. I haven't had an opportunity to do one of those in a while. Didn't feel like we needed to do an emergency pod on Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, but maybe I'm underselling Josh Giddey. I don't know. Let's jump straight into the David Williams chat. We recorded it last night, so you guys will watch it. This is, again, a live show with a recorded interview because, I don't know, mostly because I don't have the technological know-how to do it much of any other way. Before we do that, please, if you're watching on YouTube, take a moment to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. If you're listening after the fact on any of the traditional pod channels, subscribe, follow, and if you have a moment, please find that spot to drop the 5-star review. All of that stuff goes a long way towards helping this show grow. But enough of that nonsense. Let's talk to my good friend, D. Willie. There was that brief moment where I thought the recording was about to fail, but then it worked, so we're good again. I want everybody to realize that my voice doesn't sound the way it normally does because I am battling a cold. And that preface is because I want people to realize that even if it doesn't sound like it, this is about as happy as I get because, pardon me, a very good friend of mine, someone that I worked with for many years back at the previous stop, you were my right-hand man in the pod division at Sports Ethos, and it's so cool to get to be able to do stuff with you again. The great David Williams, D. Willie, as he's known among some circles, at NBA D. Will 21. You were, let me do this in order, the lead host of the Sports Ethos Memphis Grizzlies podcast. You were also an avid fantasy enthusiast and dynasty player. You were also a co-host on our annual trade deadline live show with yours truly. You were the podcast division manager for a couple of years. And now you are the host of the brand new Quadruple Double podcast for the Ohio Valley Conference. But you also know your teenagers, which is how I'm referring to them now because I think it's going to get me in trouble. Namely, people that are going to be in the NBA draft. But David, I'm so freaking happy to see you again. How are you, my man? Welcome back.
Good, man. Glad to be back. This is always fun. Never a dull time whenever we come on the show.
We did some good damn things, though, man. Like, just thinking about from a nostalgia standpoint. I know it's not like that long ago. It was only a couple of years, but I don't know. I feel like you and I, we really built up that division from the studs. You were the guy that was out there training everybody how to record and how to edit and how to post. And like, we were bringing in people. We were trying to get folks up to snuff. We were trying to get them to do the right way, the right sound, the right quality, the right frequency, all these things. And now you get to focus on your stuff, which we'll give you some promo windows here at some point in it. But I want to talk to you about rookies.
All right.
namely the ones that actually aren't even in the NBA yet, but will be. This podcast is going to air on Tuesday, so a little over 24 hours from the time this thing drops, and it's going to be a similar format to what I've done the last couple of shows with guests as well, which is basically, look, you're a dynasty fantasy player,
Yeah, absolutely.
but there has to be a redraft element to these rookies because that's how most people still play fantasy sports. And you know me, I have softened my stance. I'm not as much of a curmudgeon as I used to be. I'm open to rookies that typically they are big men who don't ruin your percentages. And you may recall that I think last year or the year before, must be the year before, you talked me into keeping an eye on Mark Williams in that draft. You and William Harris were like, this is a guy where if he has a landing spot, he could have fantasy value. So that's what I'm working on trying to squeeze out of you today. But let's just start at the top. Dave, who are your favorite prospects coming into this NBA draft? Reality, fantasy, whatever.
Being the host of that Grizzlies show for so long, I'm a Grizzlies fan. And so I try not to do this, but I look at it through like a Grizzlies lens that, like who is going to fit for the Grizzlies. But if we're looking like top of the draft, I think Sarr is the best prospect in this draft. And for some reason, Atlanta they can't get him in to work out. I don't know what the story is there, but I feel like they're dropping the ball. I think that he's a guy that could play side by side with Onyeka Okongwu down there and be a great front court. But apparently they don't think so, or Sarr just doesn't want to go to Atlanta because he sees the way that franchise is ran. So he would be my favorite. You talked about big man and not ruining your percentages. He's not great at the free throw line, like lower 70%. I think he was around 71 this year. But his defensive stats, you look at what his per 36 minutes, he was at 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 combined defensive stats. And if you have that many defensive stats, unless your percentages are just absolutely terrible, you're going to have fantasy value. And that's like 2 guys that I wrote down, Gobert and Nick Claxton. Both of those guys were a drag on your free throw percentage. Both of those guys were inside the top 80 per game last year because of their defensive stats. So I think that he's depending on where he lands, and I think Washington is looking like where he's going to go, and there's not going to be anybody in front of him to block his minutes. So I think that he's a guy that could definitely have value. But Dan, you and I play redraft fantasy very similar. Like we typically go after the older guys. And so I don't mind drafting Sarr, but it's about how much hype is he going to get between now and then. Right now, you don't hear a whole lot, but once this draft happens, you find out where he's at. Then obviously other, analysts and stuff are going to kind of get on these guys, and the hype train is going to rise. If he's somewhere in the 5th or 6th round, I'm okay taking him because I think he's going to easily be in that range based off of what he can do defensively.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. You kind of pre-answered it, which was how far do you think a hype train goes with a guy like Sarr? Do you think he lands somewhere in that 50 to 80 range? Because this last year was so different than most redraft drafts where you had Wemby going in the top 20, you had Chet going in the top 50. There's rarely one rookie going in the top 50, let alone 2. Thinking back to previous years, I feel like Cade Cunningham went at 95. And a lot of times that's where these guys drop. So is there a chance you think that a guy like Sarr could fall that far? Or am I dealing with pipe dreams here?
He's not going to get the hype like Wemby got. Wemby was, this generational one-of-a-kind type prospect that got so much hype. And he lived up to it. I think I wrote it down. But then he finished inside the top 10 per game last year, I believe.
Yeah.
And I was concerned. I didn't know that, first off, was he going to be healthy enough? And then were the Spurs going to be far enough out of it that they would shut him down? And he was healthy enough, and they didn't shut him down. So, the guys that took him where they were drafted him, it worked out pretty well for him. But I just was not a believer in that. I guess it's just the old man coming out and I'm not going to do it. So
yeah. I was with you on that. Like, that's one that I didn't have on my teams either. I don't feel that bad about it. Like, we had other wins. Everybody's going to have a style that they play. But do you think that his success is going to push this year's rookie ADPs earlier, or are people going to be able to sort of cognitively separate the Wemby year from every other year? I really don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. I think that this draft, you hear a lot of people, oh, this is a air quotes weak draft, and there's no clear cut number one. Like, there was no doubt that Wemby was number one, Scoot was up there, Brandon Miller. Like, you had those top three guys that were just basically head and shoulders above everybody else, and Chet fell into that rookie class because of the injury. But those top three in last year's draft, it was known before these are the guys that are going to go top three. And there's still a lot of hype. Donovan Clingan is still getting rumored to Atlanta at 1. And who knows? Atlanta is an extreme wild card here. I have no idea what they're doing. You would think with Quinn Snyder that they're trying to win. So it wouldn't surprise me if they move that pick. But, moving the number one pick is rare also. So who knows?
So are you, and I think this is basically what we heard from Noah Rubin on Friday's show last week, are you pretty much just watching to see which big man ends up in Washington?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that, yeah, like there's a runway for them. There's nobody there that's going to stop them from getting minutes. I worry about Clingan. He only played about 20 to 22 minutes a game in college, and he had a foot injury. He didn't miss much time because of that. But a 7-footer with a history of a foot injury is a little bit concerning. So I don't know how many minutes he's going to be able to play. Is he going to be a 20 to 25 minute guy? But even in the 22 minutes that he played at the college level, he was still putting up crazy defensive stats. But he's definitely going to be a drag on your free throw percentage. He was like 53, 54% from the free throw line. So that's kind of a, if you're going to take him, you better be pretty strong from the free throw line with your other picks before you get to taking him.
Who are some of the other names you're keeping an eye on? And then I'm going to loop around to some weird ADP related questions.
Okay. So Ron Holland is a guy that I really like. And I think depending on where he goes is going to make a difference how much playing time he's going to get. He's a wing. And guards / wings finding value in the league early on is kind of tough because you worry about the percentages and their turnovers. But he averaged a block and 2.3 steals a game for the Ignite last year. His percentages are not great. I'd love to see his free throw percentage a little bit higher, but he's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on. I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him sometime around the 90 to 100 range, because I think that he could, if he's somewhere where he's going to get time, that he could bring that kind of value. And then another guy, and there's two of them, and I won't go very deep into them, but Daron Holmes out of Dayton, and then Ryan.
What do you want, man? Don't.
So Holmes is a big guy, and he's a defensive stats. That is defensive stats and percentages are the categories that I like to focus on a lot. And so, Holmes, he does well defensively. And then I think he was right around 70 to 71% from the free throw line. So that's not great, but also as a big man, he's not going to drag your free throw percentage down. So he's somebody that his defensive stats, he's not going to, I don't think that he's going to make threes like Miles Turner, but I think that defensively, like, he could probably put up numbers similar to what Miles Turner does. So, and maybe rebound a little bit better than Turner. And then Ryan Dunn is a wing that he's crazy long, and I don't know where he's going to go. There's been talks about first round, early second round, but he's another guy that's he's 6'7", 6'8", got a 7'1" wingspan and big hands. He averaged 2.3 blocks and 1.3 steals. So 2.3 blocks from a wing is pretty incredible. Is he going to do that at the NBA level? I don't know. But, his leaping ability, his, long reach, he's got a 7'1" wingspan. So, the standing reach is close to 9 foot on him. He's a guy, again, defensive stats percentages, I think that he may have value too. And I don't think that Ryan Dunn is going to get a whole lot of hype. I'm actually like secretly dynasty wise, I'm hoping not a lot of people are paying attention to him because none of my picks are early in the draft. So I'm wanting to get in there somewhere around the end of the dynasty first round
We'll
to
just
snatch him
we'll
up.
edit that out on tomorrow. Nobody needs to. People that are listening to the audio version can't see the sort of wry grin on David's face as he was talking. He was like, crap, am I telling everybody about this right now? Yeah, you did it. You done did it. We're talking to David Williams at NBA D Will 21, my good buddy from days gone by. What's the deal with Bronny? I haven't asked anybody that yet. Is he just going to get drafted by the Lakers in the second round? We can all stop worrying about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm more than likely. I hate it because if you remove the name from the prospect and just look at his skills, he's a guy that I think could actually be a 3-and-D wing in the league, but he's not a guy that I think is going to produce early on in his career. I think he's going to have some development. You know, the heart issues kind of put him behind, and he came back. He played minutes at SC, wasn't crazy impressive, but he's always played on teams where he was not the best player. You know, playing at Sierra Canyon, he had Amari Bailey was on his team through most of high school. Amari Bailey is with the Hornets, pardon me. And Bailey was dominant in high school. So Bronny is used to playing a role. And the guys that learn how to play a role in this league stick. You're going to have stars. Most of these guys are averaging, 20 points in a game in high school. And then they get to the league and they have to be constrained and they don't want to do that. And I think Bronny's he's been a role player his entire life. So I don't think that's going to be a big transition. And then his dad knows how to stick in the league. He knows the ins and outs. So he's got an insider on that some of these guys don't have. And, there's talks about, would he even be drafted if he wasn't LeBron's son? That's debatable, but I like the size and the skill set from him. I don't think you see anything productive from him in the first couple years, though.
I appreciate you taking that question very seriously, by the way, because I'm
not sure. Were you messing with me?
No, I actually did want to know. I thought you could have very easily just been like, yeah, it's fine. And we could have. All right. So, I remember what I wanted to ask. What are your thoughts on Zachary Risacher? Because he got brought up on Friday, and I don't know that much about him. His numbers are kind of all over the map looking at his time in EuroLeague ball. Is he someone that could burst onto the scene, or does he seem like, just looking at like a basketball reference page, he looks like a kid that could use some development before he's fantasy draftable. But again, that's me just like, I see numbers. This is what they look like to me. I haven't studied the kid at all.
Yeah, I've watched some film on him. Again, a lot of times whenever I'm looking at draft stuff, it's through the Grizzlies lens. And I knew that he was going to be, top 3. So the Grizzlies were not going to be there. But I tend to agree with you on that he's going to need a little bit of time. I don't see him being a guy year one that has enough fantasy value. Maybe come like January, February, he figures it out a little bit. And then you start to see some value. But I don't think I'm touching him.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking too. All right, so let's play the sort of the two sides game here. Let's just look at the top 2 and assume that it's Sarr and Klingon in some order. This may not be the case, but let's just assume that's the case. Let's say it goes Klingon then Sarr, because all the reports are that Atlanta hasn't been able to get Sarr to work out. I still think there's a chance that they draft him because surprises happen. But for example 1, Klingon to Atlanta, Sarr to Washington. Where do you think those guys get drafted in fantasy, and where are you comfortable drafting them in fantasy?
So, man,
because Atlanta's got a bunch of centers already.
Yeah, they do. But you have to think that Capella's gone. Like they're going to package some stuff and send. They gave away John Collins. I feel like they just like, hey, give us a half-eaten bag of Doritos and a Coke machine, and here you go. And I feel like because of the contract with Capella, they're going to have to tack something onto him to move that contract. I would love if he came to the Grizzlies because a big man that can screen and rebound would be great next to Jaren Jackson Jr. So when they're playing the big bruiser bigs, he can just be that roamer. And he's even said that's what he wants to do. For me, I think Sarr is going to have more fantasy value just because of the percentages.
So if he's Washington there as the pick in this, okay,
yeah, for sure. And then I would say I would love it if we were somewhere around like 6th or 7th round with him. But like with Klingon, it would be later. You know, even if Klingon ends up being in Washington because of that free throw percentage, I'm probably not touching him inside the top 100, even though I think that he can get there. I just don't want that type of a free throw drag on my team.
Yeah, you would need like a Walker Kessler end of rookie season type of. That's the pie in the sky. That's the perfect situation where awful at the free throw line, but, you know, plays like 26 minutes a game and blocks 2.5 to 3 shots. And so like one thing kind of overwhelms the other. But that's what if Klingon's in Atlanta? Are you even drafting him in that scenario? Because isn't he still behind Okongwu, even if they move Capella?
Man, I would love to say yes to that question, but you could argue that Atlanta is the most dysfunctional franchise in the NBA. So I have no idea what they're going to do. You know, they trade for DeJounte Murray, and then there's talks about maybe he's going to be gone. And then I saw a report earlier today that said the only untouchable is Jalen Johnson. It's like, what are you going to get in return for Trae Young? Like, can you win with Trae Young as your primary piece? I don't know the answer to that, but if you're trading,
stop it, David. You know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think Luka is kind of, you know, the defensive thing. Those two get kind of looped in together. Luka and Trae on their lack of defense, and you can say what you want about those finals, but Luka being a terrible defender had a lot to do with Boston's dominance. You know, Boston's defense was fantastic. Don't want to take anything away from them, but you know, the talks, you have an all-star on the team, and when you're trading an all-star, what's the best case scenario? You get somebody that may be as good as them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. I would think that he would be behind Okongwu, but who knows?
Yeah. So maybe would you go flyer territory, which is like pick 105 or deeper kind of thing, or would you just let somebody else deal with it?
I'm probably letting somebody else deal with it, but after pick 100, listen, if you like him, because Klingon's a fantastic passer, and you didn't really get to see a lot of that in college. So you could get some assists. I could see him being a guy that's averaging 3 or 4 assists from the center spot in the right spot, like the right place.
Interesting. Okay, so now flip it. In our next hypothetical, it's the other way around. Sarr does end up in Atlanta against all rumors. Klingon ends up in Washington, playing more minutes safely, we would think. So then a lot of things come into play. And Sarr, I don't know, like, is he that different than Onyeka Okongwu? What does Atlanta do with a Sarr Okongwu front court, and what does Washington do with the Klingon at center? Now, does that change the way that you draft these guys? I'm assuming, yeah.
I think that you could play Okongwu and Sarr together on the floor. I don't think you can play Klingon and Okongwu together. Just Sarr's ability to stretch the floor. So I'm still taking Sarr before I take Klingon, even though the runway for Klingon, whichever one of these guys goes to Washington, they're going to be the starter. That's going to happen. So they're going to get opportunity, and a lot of time opportunity gives you fantasy value. But I think I'm just kind of bullish on Sarr because of the percentages from a big man.
Yeah, the fact that he doesn't completely ruin your free throw percent is a really nice feather in his cap. 71, 72. Like, you can swallow that from your center. 50. Yeah. That's a big difference than over 55. David, first of all, at NBA DWill21, my good buddy David Williams. What do you got going on these days? Now, tell me about that. The Quadruple Double podcast. Tell me about life. Tell me about fantasy sports. Tell me anything you like.
Oh man, the podcast is the biggest thing. I'm super excited about this. I cover the Grizzlies And there's a lot of politics whenever you get into the NBA media room. And that's just not something at this point in life that I want to deal with. I enjoyed it, had a great time, met some great people down there. But because of that, I was able to do some play-by-play for UT Martin, University of Tennessee at Martin, and they play in the OVC. So, I go to the OVC conference tournament the last couple of years, and I meet some people there. And so because of those connections, I've kind of got a lot of access to, coaches and players and things like that. And there was nothing. There were no podcasts out there covering the OVC. And I'm like, hey, let's give this a run. And the Kyle Swartz is the associate commissioner for the OVC. I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, man, I know I don't need your permission to start a podcast for OVC hoops, but this is what I'm looking to do. And I would love it if you could support it. So we had a couple meetings. We talked about a few things. And Kyle's like, anything that you need from me, you let me know and I will help you. So if Kyle happens to listen to your show, I don't know that he plays fantasy basketball, but hey, Kyle, thanks. Appreciate you. And I've interviewed a couple coaches already. The new head coach at UT Martin, man, Jeremy Schulman. I interviewed him. That was the first official episode. And then Briley Palmer is the new women's head coach at Southeast Missouri State. And you guys are listening to this Tuesday. So when you listen to this show, this morning, I will be interviewing the new head coach at Eastern Illinois. And, I'm not talking to players so much right now because not all of them are there on campus, but I'm focusing on the new coaches. And, man, it's going great. I've enjoyed doing it. I enjoy doing the interviews. Still got a lot to learn. Interviewing people is different than talking about basketball, but, it's still a lot of fun. And I'm going to be pumping out content as often as I can over there.
I hope this doesn't come off condescending in any way, but David, I'm super proud of you, man. This is amazing what you've been able to accomplish in the media space.
Man, it is. Yeah, like you'll tell, you're going to throw this back to me and tell me it's the work that I put in.
It is.
But none of this would have happened without you giving me the opportunity. And it's just, if you're listening to the show, and I'm going to do a promo here for Dan, if you're listening to the show and you're interested at all in podcasting or covering a team or anything, reach out to Dan. He got me started, and it was just he was talking about the team coverages, and I go on there and I look, I'm like, hey, Dan, you've got no Grizzlies coverage. And he kind of like jokingly said, well, you could do it if you want. And then the conversation took off from there, and I covered the Grizzlies for 5 or 6 years. And now, I've got to do stuff that as a kid I could only dream about. So thank you for that, man.
You are welcome, but I am also going to turn it back on you and say it never would have happened if you didn't grind your tail off. And you were in arena. Even as a fan, you were in arena. You were shaking hands. You're making connections, and you were putting it into that podcast. And then during COVID, you got into the Zoom media room, and all of a sudden, we had a team feed that was pumping out quotes from coaches and stuff. And like nobody else in the media knew what the hell they were doing. And you were just like, all I got to do is get on this damn Zoom feed. And I don't know, man. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. So everybody check out the Quadruple Double podcast, and mostly just check out David because he's the freaking man at NBA DWill21 on social media. I took more of your time than I intended to, but David, can we reconvene right after free agency and talk a little bit about all the insanity that is the board shuffle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hell yeah. David is a member, by the way, of the Old Man Squad, both in how he drafts his fantasy teams and in podcastery. The Quadruple Double podcast is on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. David, I'll talk to you soon, my man.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you.
That was David Williams, my good buddy, my old friend here in the basketball space. It's really nice. So that's been not for what, like, I don't want, I always worry that when I say things like this, it comes off as somehow like not as friendly to everyone else, but like I love talking to guests, but there is always, and you guys know, people that are listening, watching, whatever, like when you hang out with a buddy, there's a different thing there. And so David and I have history. So that's always cool. I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. One of the big reasons that I wanted to start the Old Man Squad Sports Network was to talk to more voices. And this, again, even here, run up to the NBA draft, not something that I was able to do quite to this degree. in years past. So really happy to get to do that. Thank you again to David Williams at NBADwill21 on the Twitters. Quick announcement here from the Old Man Squad Sports Network. New show just launched early this morning, and it happened in the wee hours of the night because it was launched by a friend out in Perth, my Aussie buddy, Lyle Swithenbank. You guys may recall him as the host of a Pelicans podcast from a few years back. He's now launched a brand new Pelicans show. It's called Flock, Flock. Flock. I got to get Lyle on the show at some point here in the not too distant future. Maybe we'll talk Pelicans off season and Pelicans sort of like season review and season preview, because in July we're going to be going through the teams. But definitely check that out. That again, all of this stuff, everything that's going on over at the Old Man Squad Sports Network, you can learn about by just following at Old Man Squad on Twitter. So very excited there. Another old pal of mine, reunited. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What a time, man. What a time. So check out Lyle, check out David, check out all these sweet dudes and what they're churning out these days. All right, so here's what's coming up. The draft is tomorrow. I actually didn't look to see exactly what time of day it is. I think it's like late afternoon, early evening Pacific time. Our schedule here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball is that tonight I'm going to be recording about a 20-minute hit with Josh Lloyd. You guys all know Josh. That will air tomorrow morning. So that'll be the last show we do before the NBA draft. Josh is going to give us some of the names that he's watching from a fantasy standpoint. So then we'll basically have 4 voices leading up to the draft, all with that fantasy breakdown. After the draft, I will probably do a show where we pretty much just list off what happened. It'll be kind of a cut and dry. That might even be its own special, like 10, 15-minute episode. Just here's who went where. Draft results episode. We'll knock that out quick. Then we'll loop back with some of these folks that study rookies, that play fantasy basketball, and find out what it all means. We'll have to make some guesses on ADP, things that we can't really know. Obviously, you get to late July or whenever the Yahoo League's open, and that stuff crystallizes a little bit. By the way, as I'm talking here, I saw a note fly by that Alex Sarr did indeed cancel his meeting with the Atlanta Hawks. So more and more, it's looking like he's just has no interest in going there. But again, we'll see where everybody lands. We'll talk to the folks that know who these rookies are, what they're good at, what they can do, how it's going to translate to the NBA. I wish I could get over this cold that I'm fighting right now. It'll be next couple of days. I think I'll be all right. And then we can figure out what we should be doing about it. A couple of shifts for the Pelicans, actually, in the front office. Not sure how much that changes things. Bryson Graham was promoted to general manager of the Pelicans, and Swin Cash, which I think Lyle may have even met with Swin Cash when he was in Nolans a couple years ago. She is now the senior vice president of basketball operations, as Shams tweets out, making her one of the highest ranking women in an NBA front office. So very cool stuff out of the Pelicans front office. They're, of course, replacing Trajan Langdon, who left for Detroit, the D. That's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for listening or watching. Please take a moment here at the end of the program to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow, subscribe, and please drop that 5-star review. Those are sort of like there was a jump up right when we launched the show, and then they've leveled off a little bit. I know some of y'all are listening that haven't done it yet. So however you're taking in the show, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever, please drop a review of some kind. Let's get those 5 stars cooking. Let's get those subscriptions cooking. Yesterday's show actually did pretty good numbers. Super early weirdo people mock draft that we broke down. Love you guys, weirdo people. And we'll probably do some more of those after the rookies and free agents land because, as we all know, mock drafts are fantasy crack. Indeed. All right, I've lost track of days. I think it's Tuesday. If it is, have a good Tuesday. If it's not, just have a good whatever the hell day it is that you're watching this thing. I'm at Dan Besbris on Twitter, at Old Man Squad. Again, follow them because stuff is happening literally every damn day at the Old Man Squad Sports Network. We're up. What are we up to? Like 12, 13 shows on that bad boy now? More to come. See you guys tomorrow.